Hello, my name is Patrick Casterly. I'm the Design Studio Coordinator at the University of Ibadan in Ibadan, Nigeria, and I work for Rice 360 Institute for Global Health Technologies. And this lecture is on conducting primary research. So what is primary research? Primary research is conducting research where you or your team are the ones who are collecting and analyzing the data. That means the result of that research is owned by you, the researcher. Examples of primary research methods include conducting interviews, performing surveys, holding focus groups, or conducting observation studies. This is in contrast to secondary research. When you're conducting secondary research, that means you're relying on others to have collected the data and analyzed it. Some examples of when you are conducting secondary research is when you're gathering information from resources like journal articles, books, podcasts, websites, or even when you're conducting research into previously developed patents. So why would you conduct primary research? Well, conducting research is the first phase of the engineering design process. With a good foundation in understanding your problem through conducting primary and secondary research, you are well equipped to move on to the next stage of the design process, which is to start generating ideas to address that problem. But first, you really want to understand the problem from a fundamental level and from a high level. When you're conducting primary research, that's when you're really trying to understand the problem at a very fundamental level. When you're conducting field studies, such as interviewing users, performing surveys, or performing observation studies, you're really trying to understand the hardships and challenges that a user faces. When you're performing secondary research, that's when you're really getting a high-level view of what the problem space is. And so you conduct research so that you are maximally equipped to understand and address certain design challenges. Maybe some of you have heard about user experience design or UX design. Well, primary research is a key component of any good user experience design methodology. In fact, conducting good user research or primary research is a foundation of designing a good solution that fits the specific needs of your user. So user experience design is an act of systematically gathering data about your user or customer needs, wants, behaviors, and motivations, and this can be accomplished through quantitative or qualitative methodologies, and I'll review some of these in this lecture. Primary research can have both quantitative and qualitative components. When you're conducting good primary research, you do want to have that qualitative component because what you're trying to do is gather information about what is frustrating your user, or you'll want to be hearing good stories or anecdotes that your user tells you so you can better understand the challenges that they face. But primary research is not only made up of qualitative components, it can also be quantitative. When you conduct surveys and gather data, or when you conduct large web analytics, for example, you're analyzing the data and gathering numbers about usage or demographics. This can be quantitative information, but in all circumstances, this is primary research, provided that it is you and your design team who are gathering the data. So one type of primary research approach is to conduct field studies. And field studies, while qualitative in nature, will really provide you with a richness in data that will really help you understand what the true needs and frustrations are of your end user. And that will allow you to make a solution which is well tailored to the needs of your end user. So field studies exist along a spectrum of having very little interaction with your user to having heavy interaction with your user. And I'll introduce several field study methodologies to you now. The first type of field study is a pure observation study. And as the name would suggest, you as the researcher are purely observing the user in the setting where the user is trying to complete a task, for example. And so for the peer observation, you want to spend significant time just observing the user, the tasks that they are trying to accomplish, and the environment in which they are working. But do keep in mind that even if you have no interaction with your user and are simply observing them, that the behavior of the user will change because they know that they're being observed. The next type of field study is an interview. And in contrast to the observation study, an interview has very close interaction with the user, which comes as no surprise. And some good tips to conducting a good interview is to reach out. Do not be shy about reaching out to experts in the field, but if you're trying to reach out to an expert, you'll want to come prepared to that interview, and that may require having conducted some secondary research in advance to the interview. You want to have a well-informed conversation with your interview subject. Next, you want to come prepared. Have a list of questions already prepared before you conduct your interview. Furthermore, focus on open-ended questions, allowing the interview subject to share as much information as possible, and really try to ask about specific stories or anecdotes that will give more richness to the conversation. Of course, you want to listen and follow up, and for both interviews and peer observation studies, you want to remember to digitize your notes as soon as you end your observation or complete your interview, because right at the end of your field study is when that information is freshest in your mind. So try to digitize your notes as soon as possible. Another type of field study is called a task analysis. A task analysis is an explanation of the tasks and subtasks that a user must take in order to complete a goal. And so before you set out to conduct a task analysis, you want to define, or you want your user to define, what it is the goal that they're trying to achieve. And so when you're conducting a task analysis, it's best to break down larger tasks into subtasks or a series of small steps. And it's okay and actually encouraged to ask a subject of the task analysis to speak their thoughts out loud as they perform each task. And what you're trying to do as an observer or researcher is to look when they don't successfully complete a task, or when they're frustrated when they're trying to complete a task, or if there's any wasted time or other challenges or hurdles that a user encounters when they're trying to complete a task. So a task analysis, while seemingly observational in nature, can actually be quite quantitative. For example, when you identify a task and its subtasks, you can observe the study participant, and you can actually assign a score to how easily or how successfully a task or subtask was achieved. Furthermore, you can also record how much time it takes for each task or subtask to be completed, and that can help you identify bottlenecks or areas of frustration in the user trying to achieve a goal. And make sure you want to write down notes or quotes from the user as you're conducting your task analysis. And conducting a task analysis is actually quite useful when you're evaluating your own prototypes and allowing the user to use the prototype that you developed at the end of the design process, and that can help you get valuable information and identify where your own prototype could use improvement. Another type of primary research approach is called behavioral mapping. And behavioral mapping is really trying to get a top-down view of where your end user is trying to accomplish his or her tasks. And so what you want to do when you're behavioral mapping is track the positions and movements of the people within the target space over time. And that will help draw out some interesting insights about where bottlenecks may exist, physical and temporal bottlenecks, and help you understand where and how the user interacts with their physical space. The two remaining types of field studies, which I'll discuss, have a heavy user interaction with the researcher. They are contextual inquiry and participatory observation studies. For a contextual inquiry, the premise of the contextual inquiry is simple. You want to interview the user while he or she is trying to conduct their task. And you want to make sure that you are perform the, performing the contextual inquiry in the setting and natural environment where the user works. So the principles of the contextual inquiry are quite simple. You are there to learn. The user can be thought of as the master, and you can be thought of as an apprentice. And so you're there to learn and to take notes and to ask questions while the user is performing their work. And so a contextual inquiry is an interview while the user is performing a task. And so in an ideal situation, you would ask the user to think aloud while they are performing their work. So they oftentimes routinely perform their work, but really ask them to walk you through the process and describe how they're feeling as they're conducting a specific type of task. And while they're conducting their tasks, you want to occasionally, but not too obtrusively, ask short, easily answerable questions to help understand the work that they are doing. So while you're conducting your contextual inquiry, you continuously want to be refining the interpretations of your user's behavior, and you can do that by observing the behavior of your user and then asking follow-up questions based on your observations. So you could ask questions like, "Hi, excuse me, I just saw you do this. Is that because of that?" So contextual inquiry is a constant back and forth until you really get a real rich understanding of what it is that is motivating and driving your user and where it is that the user is expressing frustration or irritation in trying to accomplish a task. The last type of field study that I'll be discussing is the participatory observation study, where you turn from researcher to end user under the guidance of the actual real end user. And this participatory observation study allows you to observe as well as involve yourself in the process. So you can experience what it is that the end user experiences, but at the same time receive the guidance from the actual end user. And this itself builds trust between you and your end user. So you want to involve yourself in the process, and then you yourself can identify what the points of frustration are and the bottlenecks in trying to accomplish a task. And remember that when conducting any type of field study, you want to take pictures, but please make sure that you do ask for permission before you take any pictures. Another type of primary research data gathering is to deploy surveys. A survey is a set of questions sent to a target audience that can probe attitudes and preferences of users, or it can gather information like age, gender, and other demographic information that may be useful to you. But surveys are a quick and easy way to obtain data, but they can be poorly designed. That's why I would recommend that before you deploy a survey to a broad audience, you'll want to give the survey to a friend or a colleague who is not involved in designing the survey, so that they can give you feedback in case there's any bits of the survey that are not quite clear or could use improvement. And before you deploy a survey, I would recommend that you are conscious about how long it takes to complete the survey. When you give someone a survey, I would recommend that you tell them approximately how long it takes to complete. And you can find good survey development tools online, such as Google Forms or SurveyMonkey, and you can go to these websites to help you design a good survey before you distribute it to your target audience. So just remember that conducting research, either primary research or secondary research, is an important and critical first step in the engineering design process. And when you have conducted good primary research, you will really understand the user's needs and perspectives and give you a richness in understanding and help you develop insights which will lead you to developing a prototype which really meets the needs of your user. And primary research should not be restricted only to the earliest phases of the engineering design process. The engineering design process is cyclical. So once you have gone through the prototyping process and developed a prototype, then you want to evaluate how good your prototype is, and then you can put your prototype in front of a user and go through all of these observation and field studies again, so that you can get a better understanding of how your user interacts with your device and gather more data on how you could iterate and improve your end device. So thank you for attending this lecture.